Hello students, welcome to Legacy IS Academy. So in today's video, we are going to talk about the types of rock that you see on the earth, and also we are going to discuss a very important concept in geography, that is rock cycling. So let us start and try to understand both these topics in more detail. But first of all, to give you a brief background and idea about rock, let us try to understand how can we define the rock. So the rock is something that is or that can be defined as a kind of aggregate of one and more mineral that is present on the crust part of the earth. As you know, if we talk about the structure of earth is divided into three different layers. We have crust, that is the uppermost layer, then we have middle layer, that is called as mantle, and the innermost layer is called as core. So rock is something that we find on the crust part or the surface part of the earth. Now rocks can be of variety of types. For example, it can be either hard rock or soft rock. It can have different color. It can have different sizes. It can have different kind of texture. So depending on the variety of rocks or study of these different forms of the rock is something that is called as petrology. Petrologists are more concerned about understanding the diversity of rock and also try to understand that what basically has given rise to such huge diversity on the earth's surface. For example, if we talk about granite rock is considered as a hard rock. On the other hand, soapstone is another kind of rock which is much more softer than granite. Similarly, if you compare gabbro rock and quartzite rock, gabbro is black in color while quartzite rock can be milky in color. So this kind of variety and study the diversity of the rock is the focus of petrologists. Also, what we can say that rocks do not have a definite composition of mineral constituent. For example, if we talk about feldspar and quartz, these are the two most common minerals that is found in different types of rock. Now, if we try to define or classify the rocks into various categories, overall we can classify into three different categories. The first kind of rock is what we can call as igneous rock. Second category of rock can be characterized as a metamorphic rock, and the third category of rock can be called as a sedimentary rock. So let us try to understand each of these rock and how they form in more detail. So first of all, if we talk about igneous rocks, igneous rocks are also called as primary rock. Why it is called as primary rock? Because the other two types of rocks that we have discussed, which is metamorphic and sedimentary, they mainly develop from the igneous rock, and that is why it is called as primary rock. The development of igneous rock occurs due to solidification of magma. So what is a magma? Magma is nothing but a molten mixture of rock forming minerals and usually volatile materials such as gases as well as steam. So when this magma comes from below the earth's surface, then it reaches above the earth's surface, and after it reaches above the earth's surface, the magma is also commonly known as lava. And once its temperature start to decrease, the lava or magma start to undergo cooling, and once it start to undergo cooling, the molten magma then gradually convert into a solid phase, and it is in this solid phase we see the development of igneous types of rock. Now, if you talk about igneous rocks, since their constituent minerals are crystallized from molten materials, igneous rocks generally form at very high temperature. And overall, if we try to classify igneous rocks, we can classify into two categories. The first kind of igneous rock we can call as intrusive rock, while the other category of igneous rocks are called as extrusive rock. Now, let us try to understand what is the difference between intrusive rock and extrusive rock. So, as we discussed, suppose this is the Earth's surface, this is the uppermost part of the Earth. So we know that magma comes from below the surface of the earth. So as magma is coming from below the surface of earth, for example, if it is coming from the mantle layer, then it enters into the crust layer. Now the magma enters into the crust layer. Some amount of magma basically solidifies within the crust itself. That means before this magma can reach the surface of the earth, it cools and solidifies within the crust layer itself. So such kind of rock that develops within the crust layer are called as intrusive rock, and this can only be visible to us if due to erosion the uppermost part of the earth is removed, uppermost part of the rocks and soils are removed, then only this lowermost part of the intrusive rock will be visible. On the other hand, when the magma finally reaches above the surface of earth and it undergoes cooling and solidification, the rocks thus formed can be called as extrusive. Now there is one other method of classification of igneous rock, that is on the basis of the size of the crystal. For example, it depends on how fast or slow the magma is cooling. For example, if the igneous rock is forming due to the fast cooling or rapid cooling of magma, In that time, the crystal that will form will be much more smaller in nature. On the other hand, if magma is cooling at a very slow or gradual rate, the size of crystal that will develop will also be larger, and thus the crystal in the igneous rock will also be larger or bigger in size. So this is some basic points about the igneous rocks. Now let us try to understand what can be the few examples of igneous rock that we see around ourselves. So the most common example of igneous rock are the basalt rock. Basalt rock is something that also makes up our ocean bed or oceanic crust, or we can say oceanic plate. Apart from that, we have pumice, obsidian, rhyolite, and then we have granite and gabbro. That is another very important constituents of the continental plate or continental landmass of our Earth. Then we have diabase, diorite, pegmatite, peridotite. These are some of the most common igneous rock that we find around ourselves. Basalt and granite being the most common one. The second kind of rock which we have talked about is the sedimentary rock. Now, sedimentary rock, basically, if we try to understand the origin of this term, it has been derived from a Latin word which is sedimentum, and sedimentum in Latin refers to layering or layers. So, what we can say that sedimentary rocks are those rocks which develop in different layers or have multiple layers. The sedimentary rock develop because of deposition and then it's a further compaction and cementation of the sediment at the surface of the earth. And this process of development of sedimentary rock is carried with the assistance of various erosion agents such as running water, wind, ice, or sometimes even the living organisms. As we discussed, since the sedimentary rock has derived the term from sedimentum, which is layering, we can see the sedimentary rocks are generally stratified. That means it has multiple layers and multiple strata. Now let us try to understand the formation of sedimentary rock in slight more detail. So the process of formation of sedimentary rock we can understand passes through three different stages. In first stage, suppose we have different types of rock on the earth surface. Due to the agents of erosion that are moving over this earth surface, such as wind, water, as well as the ice, we see the erosion of these rocks. Due to erosion of these rocks, small particles, small sediments of these rocks gradually start to move away from this particular area. After moving away from this particular area, for example, if suppose this is a mountain, after moving away from this mountain, then these small size sediments start to get deposit themselves in the plain areas where the slope is relatively lesser. Once the deposition of the sediment begin, after some time, as more and more sediment start to come and lie over this particular area, we see something that is called as compaction. In compaction, what happens? We have the multiple or large number of sediment that start to aggregate and start to apply pressure over the bottom layers. Once compaction progresses for a certain period of time, then finally we see something that is called as cementation, where the crystals of different sediments, especially the salt related crystals are there, they start to fuse together, they start to glue together, and thus all the sediments and further under the pressure of under the pressure of the upper rock layer start to fuse together to form a rock. And this process is something that is called as lithification. So overall, what we can say briefly that we have erosion, that is followed by deposition, that is followed by compaction, which is followed by cementation. And after this process, finally, we have what we can call as lithification, which leads to development of sedimentary rocks. So what are the examples of sedimentary rocks? The major examples, as you can see from the diagram here, for example, chalk is one of the most important example of sedimentary rock. This is the sedimentary rock that has formed due to chemical process. Then we have limestone is another important example of sedimentary rock, and this is something that has formed by the mechanical process. And then we have sandstone, shale, dolomite, siltstone, rock salt. All these are examples of sedimentary rock. Rock salt, for example, has large number of salt ions, which is also used for consumption purposes as a salt intake of the body. So that is all about sedimentary rocks. Now coming to the last category of rock, what we have discussed today is the metamorphic rock. Now, metamorphic, again, it is a Latin word which basically refers to change of the form. Thus, if we have to talk about metamorphic rock, what we can say that these are such rocks which form due to change in the pre-existing rock. These pre-existing rock can either be igneous rock or it can be sedimentary rock. So, the changes that happen in the pre-existing rock under the influence of high temperature, pressure, or the chemical reactions because of presence of chemically active solution can be called as metamorphic rock or can lead to development of metamorphic rocks. Now, metamorphic rocks develop in two ways. The one type of development of metamorphic rock happens by the process which is called as a dynamic metamorphism. Now, dynamic metamorphism refers to development or rearrangement, physical rearrangement of the crystals of pre-existing rock due to high pressure that is being applied upon it. This can happen due to tectonic plate movement, or this can also happen due to change in the sea level. On the other hand, when there is a temperature which comes into play, under the high temperature, there is a rearrangement of the crystals of the rock, and such rearrangement of the crystals of rock under high temperature, the process is called as thermal metamorphism, and this gives rise to another category of the metamorphic rocks. So let us try to understand the formation of metamorphic rock in more detail. For example, I told you we have thermal metamorphism and dynamic metamorphism. Thermal metamorphism basically is associated with the increase in temperature, a very high temperature that causes rearrangement of the structure and crystals of the pre-existing rock. Now, this thermal metamorphism can also be further divided into two different types of metamorphism. One is called as contact metamorphism, while the other type of metamorphism is called as regional metamorphism. So let us try to understand what is contact metamorphism and what is regional metamorphism. So contact metamorphism refers to a situation where suppose a rock layer is there, for example, sedimentary rock layer is there that is present here, and from deep below the earth's surface, we have a plume of magma that is rising in the upward direction. So due to the rising plume of this magma, the sedimentary rocks comes into direct contact of this magma, and thus its temperature significantly increases. Due to sudden increase of temperature to a high degree, the rearrangement of the crystals of sedimentary rock is observed, and thus it gives rise to metamorphic rock. This kind of metamorphism is called as contact metamorphism. On the other hand, what happens in regional metamorphism, you have a large volume or a large area of pre-existing rock structure that goes under the earth's mantle or that is subducted below the earth's crust because of the tectonic disturbances. And when this large area comes directly under the contact of huge volume of magma, over a large area you see the transformation of a pre-existing rock structure into metamorphic rock. So that is called as regional metamorphism. In short, we can also say contact metamorphism leads to development of metamorphic rock over a small region, while regional metamorphism leads to development of metamorphic rock over a much larger area. And here only you have contact metamorphism, only you have temperature that is a major factor, while in regional metamorphism, tectonic movement as well as temperature comes into play. So that is all about the formation of metamorphic rock. Now let us try to understand what can be the example of metamorphic rock. So one very common example as we have seen is the marble, which also is a material that has been used for construction of one of the most notable monument of India, that is the Taj Mahal. Apart from that, we have anthracite, which is a very rich source of coal. Then we have gneiss, we have hornfels. Apart from that, we have quartzite, phyllite, we have slate, that is example of metamorphic rock. And in childhood, you might have used pencil and slate to write something. So pencil is nothing but a kind of limestone. It is a chalk. Pencil is basically a chalk, so it is kind of sedimentary rock. On the other hand, slate on which we used to write with pencil is example of metamorphic rock. So that is about the metamorphic. Now, what we have to keep in mind that these three category of rock we have just discussed, that is igneous rock, sedimentary rock, and metamorphic rock, did not remain in the same stage all the time. What we see is the conversion of one form of rock into the other form of rock, and this conversion of one type of rock into other type of rock is what we call as rock cycle. So let us try to understand what happens in rock cycle. So what we can see, let us start from the igneous rock. As we have discussed, igneous rock is an example of primary rock as it develops due to the cooling of magma coming from deep below the Earth's surface. So as we can see from this particular cycle, magma rises above the Earth's surface, cooling of magma gives rise to igneous rock. Now, when igneous rock has once formed, we know that the agent of erosion will become active over this rock layer. And agents of erosion are for example, it is the wind, it is the ice, and it is the movement of water. Now, due to the agent of erosion that is moving over this igneous rock, the igneous rock undergoes the process of weathering as well as erosion. And as a result of these two processes, the igneous rock is eroded into a smaller sediments. So large volume of small size sediments form due to weathering and erosion of igneous rock. Now, as we discussed, once these sediments have developed, the sediments start to accumulate in a particular area. After that, they undergo compaction, cementation, which leads to their lithification. And as a result of the lithification, these sediments can develop into what we can call as sedimentary rock. So what we can see that igneous rock now has converted into sedimentary rock. Now, what we can say that once this sedimentary rock has developed, again this sedimentary rock further can undergo weathering and erosion and again can lead to development of small sized sediment. This is something that we can clearly see in the Himalayas that is happening today. The upper part of the Himalayas are made up of sedimentary rocks, which are also very weak rocks. And thus, when the rivers move over this upper part or upper regions of Himalaya, they causes erosion of these sedimentary rocks, and thus large volume of sediments are created here. Further, these sediments are transported by the rivers and then they are deposited in the plain area of India, which has led to development of the Great Plains of North India. Then, once the sedimentary rock has developed, if suppose weathering erosion is not happening, then it can undergo crust or it can go inside the crust layer because of tectonic movement, and there heat and pressure can be applied over the sedimentary rock. Once sufficient amount of heat and pressure is applied over this particular category of rock, it can then further convert into what we can call as metamorphic rock. Now, metamorphic rock can then further melt down and convert, and the rocks can convert into magma. Then from this magma, again we can have development of igneous rock. Thus, what we can see till now that igneous rock upon weathering and erosion and further its lithification can lead to development of sedimentary rock. When heat and pressure is applied over sedimentary rock, it can lead to development of metamorphic rock. And when the further metamorphic rock is heated to a larger extent, these rocks can also melt down to form the magma. And again, from magma, we can have development of igneous rock. So this is one cycle from igneous to sedimentary to metamorphic, and metamorphic to igneous we can see. Not only that, even igneous rock can directly convert into metamorphic rock if high degree of heat and pressure is applied over this particular category of rock. Not only that, even metamorphic rock can undergo phenomena of weathering and erosion due to the movement of agents of erosion, which can then convert into the metamorphic rock into huge number of sediment, huge volume of sediments, which can then again convert into sedimentary rock. So this overall relation between three different category and three different types of rock is what you can call as a cycle. So I hope you understood about overall concepts, what are the different types of rocks, example, how these rock forms, and what is a rock cycle. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with your fellow aspirants, as well as subscribe to our channel for more such helpful content. Thank you very much.